For the last couple years on this show, I reviewed either pieces of coal or something that would put someone in a bad mood after watching it on the first week of December, and that's no fun. It's like, what a great way to kick off the holiday season with these carols. Deck the halls with Pyrrha's dead body, fa la 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 la. So screw that. Also, sorry for your ears bursting. We're going to look at some festive Christmas films for the first week of December. And what better way to do that than to review something that a lot of people probably saw growing up. The holiday films created by the Rankin Company. Founded in 1960, the Rankin Company is mostly well known for their holiday specials, as well as their use of stop-motion animation that was made in Tokyo, Japan, which is seen in a lot of these specials released during the company's lifetime. Update/addendum time. Rankin was also well known for their adaptations of the Lord of the Rings series, as well as, well, Thundercats, which I think is more notable than the whole Lord of the Rings thing, but that's a whole other can of worms I don't want to get into. Although, because I made this mistake in the original video of not mentioning the Thundercats creation, if this video gets 15 likes, I will cover the original Thundercats series, or at least the first season, because there's a lot of episodes to it. So yeah, if you want to see me cover an old 80s property, yeah, like the video if you wish. But yeah, back to the video. The company went debunked in 1987, but their legacy is still remembered even decades later in the form of these films, and will likely be remembered for years to come, whether it be because of their animation, story, charm, or even the catchy music and memorable characters. We're not going to cover all of them today, since there exists up to 17 holiday specials produced by this company from 1964 and 1985, but I do want to kick off this little look back on these films that made me smile as a kid around the holiday season by looking at the first 4 holiday specials / films released in chronological order. Speaking of which, any jokes I make in this are all in good fun. I do have some issues with these films, yes, and these films have shown their age, but these still put a smile on my face while watching them, and they are nowhere near as bad as some of the other stuff I've looked at in the past. So with all that said, let's start off with Rudolph. First off, get a look at this promotion of the broadcast back then. It's cheesy in a good way and old, yes, but I specifically noticed this text. General Electric presents another full-color fantasy hour. Oh, I'm sure bootleg Three Stooges guy over here is having some fantasies about that snowman right now. He's certainly dreaming of a white Christmas. Anyways, as the title states, this film is an adaptation of the original song written in 1939. We get Rudolph's red nose, it glowing, though frankly I think that's because he got into some nasty poison ivy here going off the texture of these leaves. Benning from the Reindeer games by the guy who would later voice Jameson in the 60s Spider-Man, etc.
And even though I'm your instructor, get me some pictures.
But on top of that, we also get scenes as well as side plots about Rudolph growing up, as well as befriending not only an elf who wants to be a dentist instead of a toy maker, on top of him falling in love with Clarice, a female reindeer, and both their chemistry is handled pretty well, and both their interactions with Rudolph felt natural and nice, which I do appreciate. We also get to see the island of misfit toys, aka the remains of Toys R Us, and their adventures on the island, as well as Rudolph having to save his family from the snowman creature, on top of him earning love and respect from his family despite their previous hatred of him for said red nose. And all of these were nice to see, not only because it makes the story more interesting, but it also makes some of the characters more interesting as well, especially with Rudolph and Claire / Hermie the Elf, who come across as characters with a lot more depth to them than I originally thought with a film like this. We see their goals, their chemistry with other characters, and even see them kicking ass / being good people in this film. It's not amazing, especially when compared to films with deeper storytelling, but for the time, as well as the type of film this was, I liked it. Not every character is great or interesting though, especially the other reindeers, and even the villain / Yukon, as well as, Santa, but our main leads are pretty good, and some of the supporting cast I mentioned earlier is also pretty good. Though I do find it funny that most of these people disown Rudolph for this red nose, yet they're okay with the potential incest going on with the Clauses calling each other Mama and Papa. I think that's a bigger problem than someone's nose lighting up like a match, but I get it. It's source material and all that, so let's move on to something else. For 1964, the animation and music are pretty good. The songs are remixes of the original song, catch / great to listen to for the most part, and even the models used still look pretty good despite them looking a bit dated nowadays. Of course, a lot of the puppet figures used back then were destroyed / gone due to the time period and the production team having no clue what the future value these would hold, but still, they look pretty good for 1964, and it's good to see a few of them are still around to this day. Hell, even with the occasional glitches / stutters in the movement sometimes, the stop motion is also pretty good for the time, especially for a 50-minute film that required hundreds of hours of animation back in the day. Though in this world, the snow seems to be pretty magical as it transforms the world of live action into a stop motion world in a matter of years. Speaking of, an aurora borealis, at this time of year, at this time of night, in this part of the film, localized entirely within this review. Yes, it is. But yeah, there's really not much else I could say about this film. It's a really great story expanding the original song and poem and giving me a Rudolph who begins thinking he's an outcast, but by the end, proves that anyone can make a difference in the world no matter what they look like, backed up by great songs and a good supporting cast. There's a reason I watch this every year when I can, and I highly recommend it. even as an adult. It has still aged well to an extent, despite my snark earlier. And yeah, it's not perfect, but I still like it, and I can even appreciate elements about it that I didn't notice as a child, like the animation or the characters itself. Like the song itself, Rudolph will go down in history, but in a good way. So yeah, starting off on a strong note here, let's move on to the next film. Starting off, the animation's taken a nosedive in comparison to Rudolph, not only because of the models looking horrifying,
He got his eyes!
but I also noticed a lot more stutters and glitches when compared to Rudolph. Even the color palette isn't my cup of tea, going from a bright and colorful palette to a more washed out and darker / blander color palette this time around. Even for the setting this film takes place in, that being the area around Jerusalem, it's still not my cup of tea and it's pretty forgettable to look at. Speaking of editing, there's cases where sound effects and music isn't done that well or even barely exist to begin with. Take this scene of one of the characters smashing a jar, for instance. Normally, a sound effect is played for the sake of emphasizing the impact, but it's not present in some of these scenes, and that's kind of confusing because it shows up in other scenes from time to time. I mean, what kind of fool would forget to put in sound effects for a big scene? The music is also just okay. Maybe it's because I wasn't a big fan of the original song this movie is adapting into a special, but even the non-remix songs aren't that memorable on their own while listening to them in the film. Is the story at least good? Yeah, that's fine. Basically, it's about these two guys who want to take Aaron, the titular drummer boy, and put him in their caravan to profit off him, and as the film goes on, we see Aaron's character arc of hating humans for killing his parents as a kid, and by the end of the film, he feels kindness towards them again after he places his drum for the baby Jesus, and his goat is healed. Despite having half the runtime of the last film, this being 25 minutes, it's a story that does an effective job establishing the world this film takes place in, as well as Aaron's character arc. It's not amazing nor memorable, especially when compared to Rudolph's story, but it works for what this film is trying to do. But yeah, there's really not a whole lot for me to say about this film in all honesty. The animation isn't as great, the characters aren't all that interesting outside of Aaron, and the story is just okay. It's ultimately harmless though, and I could see why some people like it, and more power to you if you do, but I'm not one of them. But if I saw this on TV at one point in the future, I'd probably still watch it, because like I said, it's ultimately harmless, far from the worst film / special I've seen, and it has its good traits in the end, even if I may not agree with some of them. 2 down, 2 to go. Like the last two, this is an adaptation of a popular Christmas song, and also like the last special, it's 25 minutes. But unlike the last two, this was done with a different animation style entirely, 2D animation. And for the time, it looks alright. It does have some instances of disappearing objects / cut off hands, but the colors are vibrant, the animation is fluid, and the character models look pretty good for 2D animation in the 60s. Probably because the character and background drawings are handled by Paul Coker Jr., who was also an artist for Mad Magazine, and that's pretty cool. Let's get into my thoughts on the story. As an adaptation, it hits the basic notes of the original song just like the other two, but there isn't really a lot here that really expands upon the original song or the story or characters like Rudolph did. Admittedly, that could be because of its shorter runtime, but it's still disappointing. With the exception of Frosty, Karen, and our antagonist Tinkle, most of the main cast and supporting cast is really forgettable and bland characters, and as time went on, I ultimately kind of forgot they existed. Even then, the remaining 3 characters aren't all that great either, just okay at best. Hell, when the threat of Karen potentially dying in the snow came up, I was like, oh, okay, gotta save, what was her name? Karen. Maybe if the film gave her more to do / made me care about her as a character more, I might have felt something. But since they didn't, well, here we are. A potentially adult man holding a little girl in his arms in the snow.
Quick! Someone get some magical orbs! I hear they can revive pointlessly killed off children!
Frosty existed, I guess. Not really much I can say about him outside of him being a good person, saving Karen from the cold snow. And Hinkle is kind of bland as a villain, even for the time. But yeah, the voices and music are fine, nothing really memorable though like last time. The pacing is fine, and the film is just okay. It's not bad, it's not great, it's just okay. But I feel like more could have been done to it. Maybe more of a runtime, maybe make the 3 characters mentioned earlier more interesting, that kind of stuff. But on its own, like Drummer Boy, it's ultimately harmless, and I could see why people like it even to this day. It's just not my thing.
And with that, we have 1 film left.
Santa Claus is coming to town.
Ain't going off this buster, he's not the only one coming.
Unlike the other specials thus far, this adaptation feels the most like, well, an original work instead of an outright adaptation of the song in question, as it tells the origin story of Santa Claus, aka Kris Kringle, as well as the origin of his toy workshop, his meeting with the future Mrs. Claus, and how he got his reindeer and powers. And I really like this. Not only because it feels more like a story is being told instead of just a song being adapted, but also because it's executed pretty well and has some interesting twists and developments that put a smile on my face. Same with the character of Kris Kringle, who comes across as a genuinely nice person despite his past, and his action / kindness despite the king of of the town that he's delivering toys to, constantly trying to put him down and or stop his actions, make me want to root for him as a character, which is a good thing, especially since he's our hero in this story. I also felt the chemistry with his family and Jessica, aka the future Mrs. Claus, was also handled pretty well. And sure, Jessica isn't as developed as other characters I've seen in other films, both holiday and non-holiday, but she wasn't a terrible character. Even the puppets for this are pretty good. A lot more detailed and colorful when compared to Drummer Boy, though some of them look like, well, yeah, they look like they took some drugs. Probably from this guy's stash. I mean, he does have talking children in them, so it's possible he could stash a little white Christmas in there while he's at it.
Or other things.
Even the songs are really good this time around, for the most part. Whether it be their lyrics, composition, or beat, a lot of the songs are catchy, memorable, and pretty good for both the time and even today. The titular Santa Claus is coming to town, put one foot in front of the other. Sure, the song Be Prepared to Pay is aged poorly and has some awkward lyrics about kissing an adult man to get a toy, and I could see why some parents cut that song out, but the rest of the songs are pretty good, and that's really great to see. The rest of the characters are fine. Not really anything to write home about, though. They're about as bland as the town becomes when the villain bans toys, and you may think that only means the kids don't have fun. Given Jessica and the others having miserable expressions on their faces, I think they do have a few special toys they like to play with that got taken away thanks to the ban. So thank goodness Chris came by to give them some toys regardless of the ban, otherwise who knows what would have happened to them if it wasn't for him and his little friend. That was terrible. Who the hell wrote this? Oh, right. Me. So with that, I think that's all I have to say about this.
Twas the night before Christmas. What a disappointing start, featuring characters flatter than no-name Pop-Tarts. The story was uninteresting and paced without a care. Needless to say, this left the film's ending and character development in such disrepair. Albert was an unlikable shit and changed his ways too easily, and when the clock was ruined, I knew this film's length was getting a little chubby. I sat back in my chair after the visuals gave me a slap. The colors, backgrounds, characters, and movement, it was all utter crap. I paused the film a few times because my ears needed to be assessed, because the film's score was an unbearable, nasty mess. Away to the sink I flew like the wind, wet down a cloth for my ears before they were further sinned. Out of the corner of my eye I saw newly fallen snow. Maybe a snowball fight could relieve my eyes and ears for a bit. Ho ho ho. When I returned, I saw the main characters lost a lot and looked worse for wear. A pity they were so flat and uninteresting, I couldn't even muster up one singular care. But the little shit from earlier came up with a new trick. He would fix the clock to redeem the town in the eyes of Saint Nick. Sadly, the suspense of that couldn't keep my attention. Because it was a Christmas film, these usually end with positive intentions. As Santa was ready to pass by the town that was so unkind, the clock had rung, and Santa had changed his mind. How dramatically convenient with an ending I saw coming, and the ending didn't feel deserved. It just felt crummy. And then, in a twinkling, the movie had reached its end. It had about story, characters, music, and animation. As all of it flew in my head and was spinning around, I shook my head in anger. What a waste of time and sound. More effort was put into the poem that inspired this. How could this adaptation do a job that's filled with poor quality piss? Most Christmas movies fill me with some kind of cheer, but this movie has nothing, like an empty can of beer. No charm, no good characters, no great holiday music. Poor pacing, poor writing, a bad ending? What a jip! This bit has been going on for a very long time. I should probably end it here. Stop it on a dime. So I spring to my keyboard, my fingers prepared, to type away my thoughts on this movie. It shall not be spared. So it's time to exclaim as I finish this right. Happy holidays to all, and fuck 'Twas the Night. Adapted from a book of the same name, this film is about Santa quitting Christmas because kids don't believe in him anymore. And yet, this announcement gets published in several newspapers confirming that Santa is real in this universe, and thus people still believe in him enough to publish this information, but who needs that pesky thinking/logic when we can spend half the movie wasting time finding a kid that believes in Santa, and then the rest of it getting home, capped off with Santa ditching his vacation because he made one girl cry in a letter. Can you tell I hate the story yet?
Dear Santa.
Because it's so stupid, poorly paced, and gets resolved so fucking easily that it's insulting to my intelligence and me as a viewer. This whole issue could be resolved in 2 seconds, and yet it drags on for 50 minutes. What makes it worse is that the solution, just get someone else to be Santa, is actually considered, but is dropped because 2 of the most incompetent elves I've seen in these movies spot Mrs. Claus as Santa, and then Mrs. Claus is like, nah, this idea is bad. Even though most kids would be asleep when you go down the chimney, and, as your song dictates, you wouldn't let people see you from the front anyways. This movie is dumb. Dumb.
Speaking of dumb, let's talk about Mr. Claus. So he decides to not give kids gifts because he's sick and thinks no one believes in him anymore. Yet when he finds out Jingle and Jangle went out with Vixen to find a kid, he gets up out of his bed and races towards the three as if he was perfectly fine. Hell, the end just gives further credence to my theory that Santa's just faking it, as after he reads that letter, he decides to forgo his vacation and say that he's never better. This version of Santa is basically the kid who fakes being sick so he can play video games all day. Even the animation isn't all that great. The models aren't as good as Rudolph or Santa Claus is coming to town. The animation's pretty stiff and glitchy at points. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of the animation either. What a shame. Hell, one of the only things I like about this movie is the Miser Brothers song, and even that has its issues thanks to the visuals and models used in said song. And the funny thing is, this song and the Miser Brothers themselves, not in the original book. So if this was not even inserted into the adaptation, it's very likely this film would have been easily forgotten in terms of holiday classics, because this song, well, good, seems to be one of the only few things people know of the most when talking about this film. That is depressing. Every other song is either forgettable or as crappy singing, i.e. the song Anyone Can Be Santa. I'm sorry, but it sounds like the actress is more saying the lyrics as her character instead of singing the lyrics as her character.
Yes, who would know the difference? I fantasized it a lot.
Is this some kind of twisted joke? Overacting!
In other words, it sounds like she isn't putting in much passion to the performance of the song. Yeah, this was not fun at all. It was boring, terrible. It made me apathetic towards the holiday of Christmas. The exact opposite of what these kinds of films should do to a person. I should be happy about Christmas, happy to spend time with family and wrap gifts for them and the like. So fuck this movie. I'm gonna go watch a good holiday special, and then I'm gonna come back and look at the next film in the Rankin Bass catalog.
And a one, and a two, and a three.
Vocal percussion on a whole nother level.
For the first time in this marathon, I found a Rankin Bass movie that's not good, bad, or even decent, but rather white noise. So the story is about a shepherd who gets blinded by lightning that causes a tree branch to fall twice in a matter of minutes, and spends some time at a church while he recovers, and then at the end he gets his sight back and stays in the church. It's not bad or great, it was just, eh. But like I said earlier with Bree's analogy, it's really nothing memorable or anything to write home about, which also makes it hard to talk about. Even this paragraph feels like I'm trying too hard to explain my thoughts on the story. The music, like last time, is incredibly forgettable, and unlike the last time, it doesn't have the Miser Brothers to come in and give at least one good song to listen to. I guess they were too busy preparing for that spin-off that took a few decades to come out. You know what? Screw it. I'm ending this entry early. All I'm doing is padding this out, and I'm sure it's boring you two hearing me stretch on my thoughts on what's ultimately a forgettable movie to me. So why don't we just move on to the last movie and just chuck this film in the bargain bin where it belongs. Finally! A film that makes me feel something again! And that feeling is disappointment. Of all the Rankin Bass movies so far, why was Frosty, the one that had no sequel song, mind you, given a sequel and a wife? I guess they took the Back Again Someday part of the original song too seriously, because Frosty is the only thing returning in terms of the cast, because none of the original characters from the first movie are back, nor is the villain Hinkle. Instead, we get Jack Frost, who is pissy that Frosty stole all the fame from him, even though he only showed up in one town, had left for a few years, and Jack barely makes any public appearances for people to make songs out of. Speaking of stupid, remember how the first movie showed that if Frosty lost his magic hat, he'd revert to a regular snowman? Well, that does happen in this movie after Jack steals the hat, but then this condition's ignored when his girlfriend Crystal makes a snowflower and gives him love, and then he gets the hat back anyways. So, what was the point of that scene exactly? Now there's no reason to feel any concern/tension for Frosty, because now if he loses his hat, magic love flowers can bring him back. This feels like something I'd write, not someone putting this out for consumers to buy. Speaking of Crystal, she was an incredibly forgettable character in this, outside of being interested in Frosty, and having a couple lines telling Jack Frost he's important since he gives them the winter they need to survive. But then again, Jack Frost and Frosty were also incredibly bland and uninteresting in this movie in terms of plans/personalities, so it's not like this is an issue exclusive to the new character Crystal, or the kids that show up in this film. I'd say the backgrounds have more personality than these kids, but that's too easy for me to say, and I don't want to lower my qualities to this film's levels.
even if that's probably too late for me. Speaking of low, music is once again forgettable/bland. Even their cover of Winter Wonderland isn't up to par in terms of performances from the singers Andy Griffith, who also played Frosty, and Dennis Day. It's just not my cup of tea, unfortunately. But, hey, the animation's slightly better than the last Frosty movie. Probably because there isn't as many animation errors as that one. It's just a pity I can't say the same about the rest of this film. Frosty's Winter Wonderland is a slight improvement in terms of animation, but everything else about it is worse than before, and the issue of the short runtime causing the story and character arc/development to feel rushed is once again present here. Like the last Frosty movie, I don't recommend this film to anyone this holiday season, nor do I recommend the other 3 I covered in this volume. Which is really sad, because I loved Rudolph and Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and I thought the studio could only improve as time went on. But, as I showcased here today, the opposite happened, and that's a shame.
The holiday season, a time of joy, merriment, and mass/sanitizer during the Christmas party. Yeah, Christmas has sure changed since 2019. For some universes, it's probably been a year since things changed drastically. But for this world, it's been 10, and it sucks. But at least they still air the older Christmas specials on TV, so there is that. So after a long time, let's continue looking at the Rankin Bass catalog. So what's next up on the docket? Rudolph Shiny New Year's. I'll get the liquor-laced eggnog for my adult viewers. This is gonna hurt. So, after 12 years, we finally have a sequel to Rankin Bass's first Christmas special, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Like a lot of sequels, this one has barely anything to do with the original. Legit, outside of Rudolph and Santa, and even that's a stretch, no one from the original movie returns for this installment. Then again, after looking at the model for Rudolph, maybe they saw it was a bad idea and ran off, because, yeah, this is a hideous design. The colors look a lot more faded, the fur looks a lot more like paint instead of, well, fur. It's not a good model, which is a freaking shame because the human models look great and are appealing to the eye. So what happened here? Speaking of what happened, why is the story so boring? Legit, it's about Rudolph looking for the new Father Time who went missing, and most of the movie is spent with Rudolph just walking around looking for him, while also running into flat and underdeveloped characters along the way, as well as dealing with an evil bird who wants to kidnap the new Father Time so he can live forever, or some crap like that. Really, this movie drags its feet pacing-wise for most of the runtime, and the characters are so incredibly uninteresting that I was close to falling asleep multiple times throughout watching this movie. Sure, the original didn't have very deep characters either, but at least a decent amount of them had a somewhat character arc or were interesting enough personality and character-wise to keep my attention.
Fuck you!
This film doesn't even have that going for it, and that is depressing because a lot of the production on this movie worked on some of the good Rankin Bass films prior to this, including the original Rudolph. So to see a flat and uninteresting cast of characters, including Rudolph, who barely grows or does much outside of searching, in a movie with people who've managed to pull off interesting casts before in these holiday specials, that's frustrating and disappointing to me, because I know they can do well even with the runtime of 60 minutes. And like I said earlier, that can also apply to the story. Now I'm going to go a bit further on it. A good chunk of this movie could have been trimmed down, or at the very least, improve the slow-as-nails pacing, make the story more interesting with twists and the likes, or even improve the character element with the time. But since they didn't do that, here we are. A 60-plus movie that spends a good amount of time searching for a fucking baby, and has Rudolph encounter characters flatter than cardboard and are about as useful as a fucking appendix. Fuck, now I'm using analogies from my crappier days as a content creator. So I think that's a sign I should move on to something else to talk about.
What war are you in? I'm at the soup store!
Why weren't you at cock practice?
Fuck you!
Out of their entire catalog to make a sequel to, this is the movie they chose? Seriously? Okay. Well, maybe they improved on those elements that didn't work in the original movie and improved it here. And they did. If you dig deep enough in one of the hundreds of sand dunes this movie has. A pity this movie doesn't give me much else to say or much substance, because like the last movie, it's basically about a character searching for a thing. I know, how original for these movies. But hey, this time, it's silver bells that were stolen from the Romans. Oh shit, fam, they're being very daring today. What's the next thing they're gonna do? Make the characters interesting? The universe may implode if they do that. Well, thankfully that doesn't happen, including the villain who somehow delivers a more inconsistent tone in delivery than me, and that's saying a lot.
To rush you, but what do you idiots think you're doing?
If this suit was any more generic, you'd have a name like Brutus, or Bill, or David, and who'd have a name like that? But I digress. Is there anything else for me to say about this film? Well, not really, and even then I was really stretching it for this part. The story just wasn't that great, the characters were flat, and even the models weren't that great. Just another forgettable Christmas movie. This is depressing. 2 in a row now. Oh my god. I don't know if I have crappy luck or something, but this is now the 3rd Rankin Bass movie in a row that has given me so little to talk about. The story is incredibly forgettable, the characters are flat and unlikable, and it's so boring that it leaves me next to nothing to review here, and I hate that! Maybe it's because I'm getting rusty at reviewing, or maybe it's because these films are just that unappealing. Either way, I am not having fun with this, and I'm sure some of you aren't enjoying this either. So instead of prolonging this any further, why don't I just put this movie and video out of its misery? Fuck that. We're tearing it apart with jokes instead. So let's do it!
You never knew Santa had a donkey?
I thought that was just what he called his chefs.
And of course you all know this feller.
Yeah, he had better animation and models than what I'm currently seeing.
You want to know more about Nestor?
No. Damn, he threw him so fast the sound effect couldn't sync up. His mom's dead, so let's reuse the joke about Nestor tripping over his big ears. That's totally fitting.
But Mary, you were heavy with child.
I thought her name was Mary, though.
Your ears can do a wondrous thing no other ears can do.
Nestor, with your ears so long, can you get us to the farewell song?
Look.
I'm practicing my spirit gun technique. What do you think? And that's about it. There is technically another movie I wanted to cover for this installment, The Stingiest Man in Town, but I couldn't get a copy, and the earliest I would be able to get a copy would be in February.
At long last, we're finally here. It's been over a decade, largely thanks to 2 shitty viruses, but I am finally covering the last of the Rankin Boss movies, and it feels incredibly hollow since most of these after Volume 1 have been mediocre or bad. But will these last 5 entries into the Boss of Rankin be able to break this curse? Let's find out.
Anime boobs and harassing Cynthia Diet Coke.
Oh great, another fucking Rudolph movie. Look, I get that the original Rudolph is a holiday classic, but did it really need to be milked to the point of not only multiple sequels, but also a crossover with the equivalent of Christmas anal beads enlarged and given life? Seriously? Anyways, this movie is about Rudolph and Frosty going to a circus, but gets involved in the mess of a plan done by some creature named Winterbolt, who wants to take over Santa Claus's territory, and also stop Rudolph because he's the only one who has the power to stop him. You know, except for guns, fire,
Piss.
So what makes Rudolph so special? Well, see, this film, which is connected to the original Rudolph movie because fuck it, adds in a retcon/change that Rudolph was given his glowing nose not because of a weird defect or poison ivy, but because of this fairy giving it to Rudolph with the stipulation of if he ever uses it for evil, even once, it goes away forever. Except for when Rudolph beats up Winterbolt later in the movie and gets it back. Oh, and also, the movie states that nothing is forever, indicating that the magic would go away eventually anyways, so even if he never used it for evil, it would go away anyways. Oh, so despite no longer needing the hat to stay alive as shown with Frosty's sequel, which is also somehow connected to this jumbled fucking mess thanks to his wife being here, and she was introduced in his sequel, Frosty is turned back into a non-living snowman after Winterbolt takes the hat. Yeah, the story is dumb if you couldn't tell. The pacing is incredibly slow, dragging its feet throughout the film to the point of boring me. And even when it doesn't add in stupid changes to the original films that came before this one, the new additions to the story, like Winterbolt's backstory and the plot involving the circus, aren't handled that well, because not only are they uninteresting and are boring, but the latter doesn't even feel like it has anything to do with Christmas or even the spirit of Christmas. I get that it's a Christmas in July, like the title states, but my issue isn't that it takes place in July and not December, it's that it doesn't feel like it has the spirit of Christmas at all. The story is shit. But how was the rest of the movie? Well, not that great.
How could I miss?
I don't know, how did you?
I already bitched about the slow pacing, but what about the crossover itself? How's the chemistry? Shit, Rudolph and Frosty's interactions don't feel natural at all, and the times where they do try and elevate / stick up for each other also suffer from this issue, i.e., Frosty giving up his hat to try and get Rudolph's magic back. It doesn't feel like a friend helping a friend to me, and instead feels like something checked off on a list, not helped by the already mentioned issue of unnatural chemistry between the two's interactions. Speaking of terrible, not a fan of the models used here. Colors aren't appealing to the eye, it lacks a lot of the charm the older movies had. Also, the animation is really stiff and not that good. Also, the songs fucking suck. But at this point, I can't even really express much shock at that, since this has been a recurring problem with his movies as time has gone on. So yeah, he may have had 2 eyes made out of coal and a very shiny nose, but it didn't take place in the snow, and the chills are a no. To put it simply, this film blows.
After 10 years, I'm free. It's time to conquer Earth.
Ever wanted to hear the story of Jack Frost being a human? No? Well, too bad. This movie exists, and he doesn't even stay a human at the end, and effectively just goes back to where he was at the beginning of the movie, except for a town of nobodies being saved and his love getting hitched to someone else. Also, the villain gets stopped in like 10 seconds thanks to falling debris and his robots getting laid off a cliff like lemmings. Fuckity fuck this story. Also, the models look like ass, music sucks, characters suck, nothing about this movie fucking works. There's not even anything to make a joke out of. This film is just boring and offers nothing of value. Legit, staring at paint drying was more interesting than this movie. At least with that, I could see the paint slowly change and evolve. So yeah, fuck this Frosty Jackass movie. God, that was cringe. Why the fuck did I write that?
Spider-Man!
A Pinocchio Christmas movie. All the things you could do with Christmas. You choose Pinocchio! Okay. So how is this movie? Well, you know how the last movie made me want to watch paint dry?
This movie made me want to fall asleep.
The characters are flat, the story isn't interesting, pacing is slow as molasses, the models look like sleep paralysis demons, and when I finished the film I felt like my time was wasted and I forgot what transpired. Great. So I guess the story is that Pinocchio wants to get Geppetto a gift, and then runs into a bunch of dumb shit before spending Christmas with his dad and giving him the gift of love. Also, he steals a marionette from the circus to try and make it a real person, because when I think of words that match up with holidays, theft is clearly one of them. Oh, am I kidding? That's most people on Black Friday. I know it feels like I'm rushing through this movie, and I probably am, but that's only because this film left so little of an impression on me, so there's just not much for me to say. What a shame. Alright, what's next?
Hello, Peter. Holy crap!
Am I being punked? Seriously? What the fuck does Leprechauns have to do with Christmas? Do they need to hide their gold so they can use it to get a PS6? Alright, what's the story here then? Well, basically, an Irish soldier washes up on an island of leprechauns and manages to protect their gold from an evil witch before the witch gets washed away by a cel-shaded wave.
Cell shading, my one weakness.
But yeah, this movie just felt like a fever dream to me. It was strange, it didn't make any sense, and it felt incoherent. Sure, the models aren't sleep paralysis demons this time, but the models aren't that great here either. Same with the animation. Music is also forgettable. Same with the characters. This is yet another film that offers nothing of value to me positively or negatively, which sucks. But at this rate, I'm slowly accepting that this studio's track record is more bad than good when it comes to making holiday movies. Alright, one more, and then we're done.
He's got work to do.
Of course.
Talking!
It's another fucking Santa origin. Oh wait. It has the theming of a bunch of creatures discussing if Santa should be made immortal or not. That makes it much more important. Silly me. Ugh. Sad thing is, this is the best of the ones I've actually talked about in the last couple of installments, since it has a story I care about, models that look decent, good animation, and characters that don't make me hate everything and force out a terrible sigh/constipated sigh. Legit, this movie wasn't that bad to watch. Even the songs weren't that bad, it was a decent experience from start to finish. Would I watch it again though? If I had to choose between this and most of the catalog, yeah, probably. Although Santa Claus is Coming to Town is much better in every way. But yeah, that's pretty much all the Rankin Boss holiday movies. Santa Baby being one of their last productions. Speaking of which, saw that too. It sucked. That's all I'm gonna say about it. Overall, this whole look back was actually fun for me. At least in the beginning. As time went on, however, these films just kept getting worse and blander for me. But what's done is done. It's over. I would be angry or some shit about this outcome, but
I already burned a lot of that, and you know what? I want to use the rest of that energy to spend time with my family. So, thank you all for watching, have a happy holidays, and take care.